I'm Torisaur, and welcome back to another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles character ranking. Today we will be ranking the one and only Master Splinter. Since it's been a little while since I've done one of these, a quick reminder that all of the characters we will be ranking today are the on-screen adaptations of Master Splinter, and the only times I will address comic adaptations of these characters is if they are my favorite version of that character. Also, I do not have a dedicated Splinter cosplay for this one, but I thought this outfit was kind of giving Splinter, so that's what we're working with. But with that, let's get right into the ranking. In last place is Splinter from the 2007 animated film TMNT. Way back when I first ranked versions of Splinter a couple years ago, I initially grouped 2007 Splinter in a batch of Splinters that I thought were solid but didn't particularly stand out. However, recently, especially after working on my Leo ranking and realizing most of the issues I have with 2007 Leo are a direct consequence of Splinter's actions, I really started to dislike him. And then I finally got around to reading the prequel comics, and oh boy do I hate this version of Splinter now. Also, fair warning, I am going to talk about this version of Splinter more than any of the others because I need to have a bit of a rant. In the film, Leo had just come back from an overstayed year-long training by himself to become a better leader, but it evidently didn't work particularly well as he immediately falls back into barking orders and arguing with Raphael especially. Raph's complaints about Leo going off on this trip by himself, essentially abandoning his family and then somehow expecting everyone to just fall in line when he comes back, are completely valid and also reflect my biggest complaints when it comes to this version of Leonardo, but this training was a direct order from Splinter. It was a training Splinter sent him on to supposedly become a better leader despite going completely independently, and while the prequel comics do provide a little more insight into the goal of this training, it unfortunately just makes Splinter look like an even bigger asshole with blatant favoritism towards Leonardo. Leo's training is described as a year-long training pilgrimage around the world and that he's the only one ready for it. The other turtles initially congratulate Leo and are excited for him, but Raphael is clearly upset by this decision, which Leo reads as jealousy as opposed to Raph feeling abandoned. Splinter doesn't really notice or care about these concerns and just sends Leo away to improve himself. In the 2003 series, Leo also goes on a training by himself to become a better leader, but that's entirely about him fighting his inner demons and is only a few months, not an entire year. Even if Leo learned all of the lessons and training he was supposed to learn while out on this pilgrimage, him being away from his family for over a year while they are clearly falling apart without him and Splinter continues to act like everything is fine is just absolutely infuriating. The conversation Raph and Splinter have after Leo's kidnapped by the Stone Generals really emphasizes just how far Splinter's favoritism goes. Sure, he says to Raph,
"At times, you may not be my favorite student. It does not mean that you are my least favorite son."
But then pretty immediately follows it up by saying he has the great makings of a leader,
"But only when tempered with compassion and humility."
I'm sorry, I wouldn't exactly describe Leo as compassionate nor humble in this movie.
You're impatient and hot-tempered, and more importantly, I'm better than you.
Also, the fivefold path that Leo is supposed to embrace on his pilgrimage includes courage, compassion, selflessness, humility, and community. Most of which it feels like he immediately forgot as soon as he got home, so what was the point of sending him away for an entire year, Splinter? In general, Splinter emphasizing that Raph isn't his least favorite son really doesn't hold a lot of weight, when in the film and prequel comics, Splinter doesn't feel parental at all and only really reads as a sensei, so Raph may as well be his least favorite son. The final and honestly most infuriating thing that I learned about 2007 Splinter from reading these prequel comics is that he apparently drilled into his sons that they must not interfere with the world of men for some reason. Like, I kind of get the whole ninja aspect of them needing to stay hidden, but when both Raph and Mikey try to do the right thing and help people in danger, they're scolded by Splinter as if it's the worst thing they could have possibly done. Which is absurd to me, because although other versions of Splinter have had this attitude, 2012 and Mutant Mayhem Splinter immediately come to mind, the whole point is that they learn to move on from that hesitation and allow their sons to try and make the world a better place. Not to mention in 2007, both Hamato Yoshi and the Shredder are confirmed as part of the Turtles' past, so this insistence of staying out of the world of man makes no sense. Especially when we look at the Leonardo prequel comic where he literally goes from place to place directly interfering with the world of man to help him better understand the principles he needs to, which of course ties back to the blatant favoritism Splinter shows towards Leo. Plus, Splinter is somehow okay with Mikey going off into the human world as Cowabunga Carl, but only if he doesn't help people in need. It's absurd. absurd. There's also this moment in the Michelangelo issue where after Splinter scolds Mikey and Donnie for fighting off criminals, he ends by saying, "I was so looking forward to a piece of birthday cake." bitch! What happened to not engaging with the surface world? You can't have your cake and eat it too. In conclusion, 2007 Splinter is insufferable, and he might have very quickly become one of my most hated characters in this franchise right alongside 2012 Irma. He is such an awful representation of this character, which is such a shame because he's voiced by Uncle Iroh's voice actor Mako, and this is one of, if not the last role he did before he passed. I am so sorry your legacy is tied to this asshole, Mako. I will remember you as Uncle Iroh, and not this piece of shit. With that extensive rant out of the way, in 8th place is Splinter from the 2010s live action films. Unlike 2007 Splinter, the reason Bayverse Splinter is so low on my list is because I really don't have a lot of thoughts about him. He's a very passable Splinter. He's not particularly offensive nor impressive. I will say he's definitely a bit harsher with the turtles, especially with the Hashi scene where he throws them into these absurd exercises to try and get information out of them. It's played up for comedy, but has always given me a bad vibe. The other main thing I don't like about this version of Splinter is his backstory. He is one of 2 Splinters in this franchise with no pre-existing connection to ninjutsu through Hamato Yoshi, whether it be as his pet rat or Yoshi himself. The fact that he and the turtles become ninjas because he just finds a book in the sewers is absurd. Though it's possible that wasn't their only source of training and they sought out other resources, who knows. That said, he and the turtles are still somewhat connected to the Shredder through Eric Sachs and originally being in his lab, but that connection is very loose, largely due to the fact that Eric Sachs was originally whitewashed Shredder and then they later introduced Orokusaki, but that's a whole separate issue. So at the end of the day, Bayverse Splinter is just fine. I really don't have strong opinions on him either way. At number 7 is Splinter from the 1990 live action trilogy. I feel bad having 90s Splinter so low on the list, and I'm sure a lot of fans of those movies will be upset with me for doing so. However, as is the case with the 90s Turtles and Splinter in particular, they are very solid baseline interpretations of these characters, but they don't really go above and beyond where they stand out above other versions of the character. I have absolutely zero complaints with 1990 Splinter. I think he toes the line between father and sensei very nicely and has very fun and cute interactions with his sons.
I have always liked Kawabunga.
And of course, the campfire scene is such a beautiful representation of the strength of the bond Splinter shares with his family, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have as much of a unique impact, which is why I couldn't justify putting him too high on this list. However, because he is such a solid version of Splinter, I could very easily see and welcome him being a favorite Splinter for many, especially if there is that nostalgia associated with him that a lot of TMNT fans have. In 6th place is Splinter from Mutant Mayhem and Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mutant Mayhem Splinter was definitely the hardest to place in this ranking just because he's such a mix of things I absolutely adore and things I really don't care for. Because I started this video off with such negativity, I will get the things I don't really like about Mutant Mayhem Splinter out of the way before getting into the things I do really enjoy. Like with Bayverse Splinter, Mutant Mayhem Splinter does not have any pre-existing connection to ninjutsu through Hamato Yoshi. He is literally just a random street rat as far as we know. Because of this, he and the turtles also learn ninjutsu from elsewhere, but it's arguably worse here. Although I've always thought that learning martial arts from a random book was really absurd, at least the idea for ninja training came from somewhere. In Mutant Mayhem, Splinter gets the idea completely out of nowhere.
I promise to never let you get hurt ever again. I needed to find a way to unlock ancient secrets of ninjutsu.
And learning from YouTube videos and movies is really not that much better than learning from a book. Because of the limitations with Jackie Chan voicing Splinter and the apparent refusal to cast sound-alikes for Tales of the TMNT, Splinter didn't benefit from further exploration and development like the Turtles did in that series. Though his episode with April in season 1 was a lot of fun and had some really great moments from him, despite his voice being a bit distracting.
Everything good that has ever happened to me has happened here in the sewers. I will not leave.
Is this about your goldfish?
No, I think he's gone.
Complaints aside, I adore how much they leaned into Splinter being a dad in this universe. Mutant Mayhem beautifully captures Splinter's anxiety and overprotectiveness of his kids, which I think was a very enjoyable change of pace from what we typically see from Splinter. It's not as though other versions don't show off his dad's side, it's just they typically favor him being their sensei. And though I do have my issues with the origins of Splinter and the Turtles becoming ninjas, Splinter still kicks ass. Let's not forget he murders a man in cold blood while rescuing his sons. That fight in general is a very enjoyable watch, and seeing him take out the TCRI soldiers single-handedly was iconic. And as much as the scumbag romance is absolutely absurd, I think Tails especially made me find them kind of adorable in their weirdness, like I mentioned in my Tails Season 2 review. And the other major thing I enjoy about Mutant Mayhem Splinter is the arc he undergoes in the movie. He starts off in such a place of hatred and bigotry for humanity and slowly learns to accept them by the end of the film. I think the moment where the Kevin Eastman character reaches out a hand and offers Splinter help is such a beautiful moment and representation of this, and I think him having this history of being afraid of humans is a great explanation as to why he is so overprotective of his sons, especially compared to other versions of TMNT. This growing to accept humans coincides with Splinter learning to be less controlling of his sons and allowing them to explore the human world. I think the parallel drawn between him and Superfly was a really effective communication of the turning point that brought him to the conclusion of this arc.
There's only one way for you to be safe and happy, and that's listen to me.
There's only one way for you to feel safe and happy, and that's if you listen to me.
Overall, I really appreciate the unique approach to Mutant Mayhem Splinter despite his flaws, and I really hope the sequel movie allows for even further exploration of his character. In 5th place, I have Splinter from Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. Despite the fact that The Next Mutation is constantly dunked on for being really bad, it unironically has some really solid characters, Splinter included. He's very similar to 1990 Splinter, where he's just generally a very solid, classic Splinter. However, this series showcases a bit more of that sass and banter with his family.
I have changed my mind.
Master, you can't do that.
Yes, I can. I am old. You allowed yourself to fail, Raphael.
Don't get all Ninja Master on me.
I also think it's super sweet that he has a human friend that he just plays chess with regularly. The fact that Splinter is basically never shown having any friends in this franchise is really sad, so that's a very nice change of pace. I think Splinter does a great job of capturing the whimsy of The Next Mutation, and though it's obviously very silly at times, I do think it gives him a bit of an edge that makes him a more memorable version of the character. I know not everyone will necessarily find this interpretation of Splinter to be as enjoyable as a more serious version such as 1990 Splinter, but I personally find him to be very charming, which is why he ended up a bit higher on my list. At number 4, I have Splinter from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This may be a very controversial placement, especially for those who have only seen the first handful of Rise episodes, because if I was ranking solely based on the start of season 1, Rise Splinter would probably be dead last, even below my enemy 2007 Splinter. At the start of the series, Splinter is painted as this very obnoxious, lazy, and neglectful figure in the Turtles' lives, not being particularly invested in their training as their sensei, nor their lives as their father. There's a joke in one of the early season 1 episodes about how the Turtles getting hugs from their dad is the greatest possible prize, which is honestly so depressing. They also use gross out humor somewhat with Splinter, which is by far my least favorite style of humor. However, despite Splinter starting the series off being the exact opposite of everything that makes Master Splinter a great character, the examination of how it relates to his backstory as well as the arc he undergoes throughout the series makes him one of the most compelling adaptations. Hamato Yoshi is a descendant of the Hamato clan, and instead of embracing his legacy and duty to train in case of the Shredder's return, in his 20s he was starry-eyed and pursued a career as an action star Lu-Jitsu. He completely lost sight of his roots and found himself in a relationship with a secret giant spider lady that imprisoned him and forced him to fight in the Battle Nexus for over a decade. This man had all of his dreams completely shattered and had lost himself, so when he is kidnapped again to have his DNA used to create mutant super soldiers, it's less of a kidnapping and more of an anywhere's better than here, take me wherever you want. Lu-Jitsu manages to escape Baron Draxum's lab and liberate the baby turtles that would have become Draxum's super soldiers, but completely loses his humanity in the process. Lu-Jitsu went from being a beloved action star with all of his dreams coming true, to a mutant brat that had to hide away in the sewers, suddenly a father to 4 rambunctious kids. It's no wonder that in the modern day, when the turtles are old enough to be fairly self-sufficient, he's almost completely abandoned the role of sensei and father. It of course doesn't make the neglect of his family right. If he had this exact same backstory but remained stagnant throughout the series, he would probably still be my least favorite Splinter. However, the most important thing is that he changes for the better. Towards the end of season 1, and especially in its season finale, Splinter not only begins to take his duty as part of the Hamato clan more seriously, but passes those teachings on to his sons. In the season 1 finale, he and the Turtles do end up rejecting the pure rigidity of the Hamato clan's teachings, but going forward they become much more realized versions of themselves. themselves. They're still a bit silly and do their own thing, but they also know when to lock in and take things seriously. We especially see this in the season 2 finale, where Splinter and his family come together to defeat the Shredder once and for all in one of the greatest moments in the entire franchise. By the end of the series, Splinter not only has a great relationship with his sons in the way he is slowly making up for his shortcomings, but he's also built a great relationship with April and has come to, at minimum, tolerate the man responsible for turning him into a rat for the sake of his family. Although I wish we could have seen Casey explored a bit more in this series, especially as the Casey Jones of this universe, Splinter having a heart-to-heart with her in Always Be Brownies is a really great scene that speaks to his character as well. In general, I think Rise Splinter is a very refreshing take on the character, and although I definitely prefer his typical characterization, I think Rise Splinter is incredibly compelling and one of the best examples of the ways in which Rise takes a very unique approach to the Ninja Turtles in a way that is both effective and enjoyable. Moving into my top 3, in third place is Splinter from the 1987 animated series. Like with the next Mutation Splinter, he feels a lot like 1990 Splinter with just a little bit more going for him, while still feeling very grounded in that typical base characterization. 87 Splinter is constantly dropping wisdom on his family, both as a sensei and father. There are a lot of really sweet moments sprinkled throughout the series, but I always think of this one scene from Raphael, Turtle of a Thousand Faces.
To be an undercover detective.
A detective? Why, my student?
So I can make more of a contribution to the Mean Green Team. You know, something special.
But each of you is already special.
And while Turtles Forever does get a lot of flack for the way it portrayed the 1987 characters, I adore Splinter's scene in this movie and how welcoming and loving he is towards the 2003 Turtles.
You four are welcome here, always.
Outside of his relationship with the Turtles, 87 Splinter is such an endearing character and has some really fun episodes. One that stands out is the old Switcheroo, where he and the Shredder accidentally swap bodies, and Splinter struggling to embody Shredder's cruel attitude to go undetected is hilarious and also adorable.
Not to worry, Krang. I'll return immediately and steal the mechanism you need.
Yow! Well?
Of course. I failed. It's my responsibility to correct the error.
I think of all versions of Splinter, the narrative of him wanting to be human again is highlighted the best here, possibly because this was the first iteration in which he started off as a human. We do see a bit of this in the 2012 series, and in Rise there is definitely that underlying remorse for the loss of his old life, but whenever I think of this trope for Splinter, I always think of the 1987 series first. Overall, 87 Splinter is a very charming version of him and absolutely one of my favorites. In second place is Splinter from the 2012 animated series. 2012 Splinter is one of the greatest balances of sensei and father, showing genuine love and care for his family while also probably being the most effective teacher of all of them. I think his training scenes are easily the most engaging and fun to watch, and I think they do a great job of showcasing the characters as well as relating to the main story. I also think 2012 Splinter's personality is a lot of fun. He takes things very seriously a lot of the time, but isn't afraid to have fun, witty banter with the Turtles and their human friends.
He studies rats running through mazes. No offense.
I like a good maze. There is a saying. He who runs his mouth gets a face full of nunchaku.
They say that in Japan?
They would if you were there. Casey, your intuition is basically 0.0.
Casey Jones is a born warrior. I got tons of intuition, yo.
Did you intuit that?
On top of this, 2012 Splinter also by far has the best backstory. I'll definitely talk about this again in my Shredder ranking since it's a big reason why he's one of my favorite Shredders as well. But the way that brothers' rivalry over Tang Shen is executed is definitely the most well done, as it feels like a genuine and believable conflict in the way Shen is clearly conflicted about it as well. I mentioned this in the 2012 Sins and Wins video, but in all other versions there is never a doubt that Shen's heart belongs to Yoshi. But having that doubt in 2012 allows for Yoshi to step up and really commit to Shen in a meaningful way. This conflict also leads to the really engaging plot point of Karai being Yoshi's lost daughter. As much as that leads to other issues, Leo Rai, it's genuinely such a fun and creative approach to all three of Splinter, Shredder, and Karai. Splinter shows so much love for his Miwa, even when she's still in denial and rejecting that he is her father, and while we unfortunately don't get to see as much of their father-daughter relationship due to the Shredder poisoning that relationship for as long as possible, the few moments where they do get to truly exist as father and daughter are so sweet. The main reason 2012 Splinter is not number one is a very common criticism that has led a subset of the fandom to absolutely despise him, and while I do think it is blown out of proportion how present it is in the series, it is definitely an issue I take with his characterization, and that is the favoritism and subsequent pressure put on Leonardo as the leader of the team. For the majority of the series, Splinter is very loving and fairly equitable in the way he treats his family. He does tend to be a bit harsher on Raphael and Donatello in particular, the former because his temper reminds him so strongly only of himself and is trying to guide him to a better path, and the latter because Donnie has a tendency to overthink things in a way that gets him into trouble. But for the most part, the favoritism isn't a major issue and doesn't infringe on Splinter nor Leo's relationship with the other turtles. There are two major exceptions to this in which Splinter really gets on my nerves, those being the Season 1 and Season 4 finales. When the turtles are planning to take down the Krang and prevent their invasion in the Season 1 finale, Splinter pulls Leonardo inside and very cryptically tells him,
"The only thing of importance is that you complete your mission, no matter what you have to sacrifice. Or who."
Hey, so, what the fuck, Splinter? How dare you isolate this poor 15-year-old boy and burden him with the knowledge that he may need to sacrifice himself or one of his brothers? Even if that is a very real possibility, why are you telling him this alone? In general, this is a representation of how Leo's leadership is less about him sharing his burden with his brothers, and more internalizing and making all of the tough decisions on his own, which is a direct consequence of the way Splinter treats him as the leader, which is very similar to my issues with 2007 Splinter. The other major moment in which Splinter pissed me off in this way is in Requiem, when he tells Leo,
"I knew even when you were a small boy that you would one day grow up to be the leader of this team, and when I pass on, to be like a father as well."
I'm so sorry, why are we giving a child the burden of fatherhood following your death, sir? Even after this bitch dies, his fucking ghost comes back to reinforce this burden he's placed on his son in the wake of his death.
You are the sensei now. Your brothers need you. Karai needs you.
The sensei stuff I'm less mad at because the turtles obviously need someone to continue their training once Splinter is gone, but it feels like this is a role that's been sprung on Leo completely out of nowhere. Like, they literally don't talk about the possibility of Leo becoming sensei until the day that Splinter dies. You would think this conversation should have happened much sooner, right? Maybe Splinter figured he wouldn't die so soon and they would have more time, but given the number of times Splinter has already almost fucking died, you would think he would have had this conversation with Leo much sooner. Despite this major issue I take with 2012 Splinter, I overall think he is a fantastic interpretation of the character and definitely deserves a top 3 spot. My number 1 version of Master Splinter is Splinter from the 2003 animated series. I've already mentioned how several versions of Splinter toe the line between sensei and father very effectively. However, no Splinter finds this balance as perfectly as 2003 Splinter does. Like with 2012 Splinter, we do see a lot of training scenes, and though I do find 2012 scenes generally more engaging, in 2003 they are really well balanced out, with Splinter being a very present father. He is always there to help his children learn whatever lesson applies to them, while also being very understanding of their differences and what makes them shine. It is genuinely the perfect blend of understanding the turtles as their father and applying it to their training so they can become the best versions of themselves, both as ninjas and as people. In general, this version of Splinter absolutely exudes dad energy. In the very first episode of the series, there's a really great bit with him trying to work the shell cell.
Which button do you press to answer this thing? Hello?
Master Splinter, are you all right?
Hello?
Master Splinter.
Stupid device.
You don't have to press any buttons.
You already answered it.
There are so many fun little scenes where he's fed up with his kids' nonsense, and it is adorable.
I cannot even take a few minutes for meditation without those kids running off. What is the one thing I did not want them to do? Face the shredder! I am sure that is what they have done.
Want the china?
Oops! Kids.
One would think that table manners were a part of their training.
One would think.
I can't believe you bozos walked right into a trap.
I believe it.
Do you think we'll ever be able to teach the kids some manners?
Miss O'Neill, teaching them the ancient art of ninjutsu is hard enough. I am afraid even I cannot work miracles.
On top of being a fantastic sensei and father, 2003 Splinter is just genuinely funny. In a very similar way to 2012 Splinter, he has a lot of moments in which he sasses the shit out of the turtles and their friends.
You'll help me, right? You'll train me.
Training, Michelangelo? Surely there are comic books I could be reading. Or perhaps I could go watch television instead. Wait, my son, I know. Perhaps instead of training, I will go eat pizza. Yes, pizza sounds very appetizing right now. With pepperoni and karma.
There's also a really silly recurring bit where he starts to quote some wise individual and then turns around to say a modern phrase.
It is, as the great sage and warrior Kenji Hashimura once said, "Why walk when you can ride?"
Come again?
You would be wise to heed the ancient Japanese proverb. Phone first, in the words of the ancient master. It ain't over till it's over. It is as the great sage Sakamoto said. Read them and weep.
Oh, come on, Master Splinter, cut us a break.
If one cannot afford to pay, one should not play. Suckers!
Overall, 2003 Splinter captures everything that makes Master Splinter a great character. I absolutely adore the relationship he has with the Turtles, and there is no better example of what an incredible mentor Splinter can be. In my last ranking video, I did forget to talk about my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles iteration, TMNT Genesis, but I'm not gonna forget this time. Today we are talking about Hamato Yoshi, aka Master Splinter, which also includes the Turtles' origin story. But before we discuss the Turtles, we need to go back to Japan and talk about the Hamato clan, the Oroku clan, and the Foot clan. So Hamato Yoshi was born into the Hamato clan, who were the sworn enemies of the Foot, and the Foot clan completely destroyed the Hamato clan, with Yoshi being the only survivor. As an orphan, Yoshi was taken in by the Oroku clan, possibly by Tatsu. I think it would be fun to incorporate Tatsu into the story in this way, but I'm not sure if I necessarily want to do that in case I want to add him in some other way. But for now, Tatsu is Yoshi's adoptive father. Orokusaki is the son of the leader of the Oroku clan, and he and Yoshi are best friends. Yoshi always saw Saki like a brother, which Saki claimed to reciprocate, but doesn't exactly due to certain reasons. I want to reiterate that they are not brothers, but they are childhood lifelong friends, and Yoshi has always seen Saki as such. This is where Tang Shen of the Foot clan comes in. Like with Saki being sort of the heir to the Oroku clan, Shen is the heir to the Foot clan. She's a kunoichi and essentially the princess of the Foot clan. She and Yoshi meet and have a very Romeo and Juliet type love story. Because Yoshi is originally from the Hamato clan, it is a very forbidden romance due to their clans being sworn enemies, which is why when they first meet there's a lot of distrust between them, but then they grow to love each other. Saki is also aware of this romance and is a little bit jealous, but he keeps it to himself for the sake of Shen and Yoshi's happiness, and this little trio becomes a little secret best friend group. Yoshi has also developed a fascination for science, biology, and chemistry in particular, and this fascination combined with his secret romance with Shen has led his head to sort of be in the clouds a bit, and has become a bit less engaged with the Oroku clan and fallen out of favor with them despite being one of their most skilled warriors. And that's kind of the status quo for a while, Shen and Yoshi having the secret romance and Saki covering for them. But then we come to the marriage alliance. The Foot and Oroku clans are facing a decision in which they either go to war or unify. And since avoiding conflict is in both of their best interests, the heirs to each of their clans are engaged, which if you recall are Tang Shen and Oroku Saki. And when the Foot clan catches wind of Hamato Yoshi being the lone survivor of the Hamato clan, one of the clauses of this marriage alliance is that Yoshi has to be cast out or otherwise executed. Obviously, Shen, Saki, and Yoshi are all devastated by this. Shen and Saki, despite being best friends and having a lot of love for one another, have no interest in each other romantically, but obviously they kind of need to go along with this alliance or there's going to be an all-out war, and the number one person who will be executed in this case is Yoshi. This trio's obviously very heartbroken at the separation, but recognizes that Yoshi leaving is the best way to protect all three of them, since Shen and Yoshi's romance would put all three of their lives in danger with Saki covering for them, so 18-year-old Hamato Yoshi sets off to the United States alone to pursue an education in biochemistry. There's obviously more that goes down in Japan after Yoshi's departure, but I will expand upon that in Shredder's video. But in New York City, Yoshi makes a name for himself, dedicating himself to his studies. He's one of the top students, and gets a dream internship at TCRI, studying mutation alongside his peers Kirby O'Neill and Baxter Stockman. Kirby and Baxter could never replace Yoshi's friends back in Japan, but he finds a lot of comfort in finding this new trio of friends. One of the test subjects that Yoshi works with frequently is a lab rat called Splinter, and he and Splinter actually form a really close bond due to Splinter's heightened intelligence. Kirby and Baxter kind of dote on Splinter a little bit too, but not to the extent that Yoshi does. In this little intern trio, Yoshi is the most favored of the three of them, and Kirby is very happy for him while Baxter is just a little bit jealous. One night, Yoshi stays at TCRI a bit late to do a little bit of extra research, and Splinter runs away and leads Yoshi down the halls of TCRI, and helping him discover that TCRI is run by a bunch of alien blobs looking to take over Earth, transforming it into a colony, an extension of their own dimension, and mutating and otherwise destroying humanity in the process. Yikes! Determined to set this devastation back, Yoshi uses his lifelong ninja skills to investigate and try to find a way to stop them, and discovers that there's a very important shipment of mutagen waiting in the garage. Knowing that taking this mutagen from New York will set back TCRI operations from months to years, Yoshi and his companion Splinter steal the truck transporting this mutagen, and begin their drive as far out of the city as possible. While on their way out of the city, the TCRI truck unfortunately crashes into another truck transporting pet store animals, and the mutagen, as well as several animals, animals spill out onto the street. Injured, covered in mutagen, and Splinter clinging to the inside of his shirt, Yoshi desperately searches for an escape from the situation, as this wreck will very quickly turn into a fiery explosion with all of the gasoline, mutagen, and fire resulting from the crash. As he searches for this escape, Yoshi spies 4 small creatures moving around in the mutagen, and on the other side of them is a manhole cover. Yoshi takes pity on the 4 baby turtles in the mutagen and scoops them up as he makes his dash towards the manhole cover, and Yoshi, alongside Splinter and the 4 turtles, enter the sewers as a massive explosion is heard above ground, which fortunately does destroy the mutagen in a far more effective method than Yoshi could have ever hoped. Being covered in this ooze, Yoshi obviously mutates and takes after Splinter since she was clinging to his chest. But Splinter manages to come out unscathed due to being protected under Yoshi's shirt. The 4 turtles also obviously mutate into the Ninja Turtles we know and love, and Yoshi, Splinter, and the turtles begin to recover together in this temporary home that is the sewers, which will very quickly become not temporary. While Yoshi goes up to the surface to scavenge for supplies, he discovers that both he and Kirby have been reported dead. He correctly guesses that Kirby was also killed by TCRI after discovering their secret, and because of this he decides it would probably be better if Hamato Yoshi stayed dead as well. His last act as Hamato Yoshi is delivering a letter to the O'Neill family, offering his condolences and saying that by the time they read the letter he will probably be dead as well. When April does eventually meet Splinter and the turtles, she mentions a memory of seeing a rat man in the rain, which she had always assumed was just her young child self-imagining things, or it was a dream of some kind. But back to when Yoshi discovers that he is supposed to be dead, he decides to fully embrace this by taking on Splinter's name and renaming Splinter to Nezumi. Until the events of the main story, where April enters the turtles' lives and they're officially starting to try and take down TCRI once and for all, Splinter's version of the story is that he and Nezumi were both lab rats, and Hamato Yoshi did perish in the crash. If he convinces the entire world that Hamato Yoshi is dead, TCRI will never come looking. I'll talk about Splinter's relationship with each of his kids in their own videos. I've already talked about Donnie and Leo, so you can definitely take a look at those for those relationships, but Splinter is definitely the closest to Don since they're both science nerds. When the Shredder enters the picture and discovers that Splinter is Hamato Yoshi, it is very tense, because apparently Shen was murdered very shortly before Hamato Yoshi's death, and so when Saki learns that Yoshi is still alive, the devastation he's felt for the past 13-ish years at losing his 2 best friends mutates into hatred, and that hatred is directed at Yoshi for abandoning him and Shen, and maybe she'd still be alive if he hadn't left. It's very messy. It's obviously not entirely logical because the 3 of them agreed that it was best for Yoshi to leave, but with Saki being completely alone for so long and then taking over the foot, which I'll expand on in his video, that devastation very quickly morphs into hatred. And so a major story beat that I would want to explore is Yoshi trying to reconcile with Saki, while also struggling with the fact that the Shredder is directly working with TCRI and thus is an enemy. I don't have a lot of specifics on how that will play out, but the one that eventually helps Saki to finally forgive Yoshi is actually Krang. The 2 of them reconciling, as well as Krang's role, is definitely something I will explain more in Shredder's video as well. There would also definitely be an arc revolving around Karai because, surprise, when Yoshi left Japan, Shen was pregnant with his daughter, which she learned either shortly before or after he left, but kept it to herself because she did not want to add another thing into this whole mess that was Yoshi's life being threatened. I believe I mentioned this in Karai's video, but the foundation of this arc is Yoshi and Karai recognizing that Saki is her true father, as he is the one that has loved and cared for her entire life. But Yoshi will always have love in his heart for his daughter and is there in case Karai wants to form a relationship with him, which Karai has a huge internal conflict about, especially because when she learns this, it's probably around the time when Shredder is at peak "I hate you, Hamato Yoshi," but eventually does decide to form that relationship with him, especially when the Shredder seemingly dies at the hands of Sherelle, but that's a whole different story. But that's basically everything I have solidified for Splinter's story, with a few other things I'm still considering, such as Tang Shen having survived her murder due to some shenanigans with being portaled to the Hidden City, and then her eventually reuniting with Yoshi. The main reason I'm considering this is because Tang Shen only ever gets to be dead, and I think it would be really fun to explore her as a character still being alive. Splinter is also probably gonna die at some point. I haven't solidified the circumstances or when that's gonna happen. But in the way I'm setting up this universe, it feels like it needs to happen with my story. It just feels right to have Splinter die. The only thing I know about the timing is it would probably happen pretty shortly after reuniting with Shen and pretty shortly after he and Karai decide to form a relationship, because it feels like that would be the best way to have it be particularly devastating, as he was finally able to reunite with his family but then passes before he can really see it through. Though it is also kind of a very happy ending for him because it would wrap up his arc completely. I don't know, I'm still not sure the specifics of how that's gonna look, but that's kind of my general thoughts. The other main thing I'm considering is Nezumi possibly mutating later down the line and becoming an older sister figure, very similar to Jenica in the IDW comics in both terms of personality and the role she plays with the turtles. And she also might take over as sensei following Splinter's death, though that honor might go to Tang Shen instead. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, that's it for Splinter. I'm really proud of this backstory and I hope you guys like it as well. It's honestly the biggest reason I do want to write out TMNT Genesis on AO3, but the motivation to do so has been completely non-existent, which is the primary reason why I decided to explain the TMNT Genesis lore in these ranking videos, because I really want to share this story that I've been working on because I'm really happy with it. The final thing I want to bring up before I end this video is the LEGO Technodrome my friend David and I made that is currently up on LEGO Ideas, and with your help, it could be made into a reality. This concept for a TMNT 1987 LEGO set features 9 minifigures, the Turtles Party Wagon, Krang's massive android body, and of course, the Technodrome. Let me take you on a tour through what this set entails. First, we have the Turtles Party Wagon, which has plenty of space to fit our 4 heroes in a half shell with 2 front seats, a gunner seat between the 2 doors, and a back area with a weapons rack and box of disguises. The doors at the sides and rear open, with the former featuring lowerable gun turrets. There are also compartments underneath the van that drop wacko bombs when opened. Plus, the roof features a functional pizza launcher. Krang's android body has movable arms and legs, and a place for Krang to sit in the stomach cavity. The android's hands can also be swapped out for alternative weapons. Then we have the behemoth that is the Technodrome. This technological terror can move around on its massive tire treads or remain stationary and open up into a fortress for the villains. On the left is a storage area for various weapons our villains may use in their fight for evil, including Krang's alternative hands. The balcony above is Shredder's study, with a map for meditation, candles, pottery, and a writing desk so we continue pursuing his dream of becoming a writer. The balcony across is Baxter Stockman's lab, with all of the equipment he needs to experiment and plot the turtles' demise, as well as his pan-dimensional computer companion Z. Below is a prison cell to hold any captured enemies hostage. The center of the Technodrome has control stations on either side, a massive viewing screen, and the trans-dimensional portal. Seats for both Shredder and Krang sit before the viewing screen so they can plan their next attacks, or Krang can force Saki to watch soap operas with him. The turrets on the front and sides of the Technodrome can be moved up and down, with gunner seats inside for Bebop and Rocksteady. There's also a ramp at the front of the Technodrome that opens to the driver compartment with 2 available seats. When not in use, Krang's android body can be stored inside the Technodrome. Finally, the minifigures. We of course have our fearsome fighting team equipped with each of their weapons. They're accompanied by their favorite Channel 6 reporter April O'Neil, ready to catch the next newsworthy story with her camera. As for the villains, there's the Shredder and Krang with their bumbling mutant lackeys Bebop and Rocksteady, as well as Baxter Stockman. All of these minifigures have custom decals carefully designed by me. This project is currently up on LEGO Ideas, and if it reaches 10,000 supporters, it is reviewed to potentially be made into a real LEGO set. All you have to do is go to the link in the description and click the yellow support button. If you remember supporting this project when we first created it a couple of years ago, please consider supporting again, as this is a new version that we have reposted. Supporting this project is completely free to do, and with LEGO recently announcing a Brickhead set to come out in April of this year, now is the perfect time to show them how much we would love to see more TMNT sets in the future. But that's it for this video. Let me know what you think of TMNT Genesis Splinter and which version of Master Splinter is your personal favorite. The next ranking video will probably be Shredder's just because his story is so intertwined with Splinter's, but after that I will be getting into ranking the next turtle, so make sure to subscribe so you can see Shredder's ranking when it drops and to vote in the poll for which turtle I'm going to rank next. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hype if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.